oh, so
All right. Hey, every week we like to dive into one of our experts. This, of course, is Gia Rakowski's time, my daughter, but not just that. She's an intellect, she's a scholar. She studies what's going on with Gen Z, and she looks at everything from buying habits to everything habits of Gen Z, primarily focusing on North America. That's her sweet spot. But of course, there's some overlaps in different parts of the world. Gia right now is in the center of the United States. She's literally, I mean, Chicago is basically the center, unless you want to be in Nebraska. Can you real quick, Gia, Gen Z is what year to what year?
you're gonna have to make me look. I'm gonna have to look that up again. Gen Z years. I looked that up
I
last
believe
time.
it's
I don't know if I can remember. Okay,
2001. What?
no, 1997 and 2012.
Ah, got it. Okay, got it. Got it. And Gen Z is is it like fragmented? Are all Gen Zers basically the same, or is there different types of Gen Zs?
Okay, that's actually a really good question. So I'm gonna create like a baseline of information here. When we look at experience and time and the way we develop, it's not necessarily linear towards like, oh, you change based on being three and then four and then five and then six, right? It's based off of blocks of experience. I don't know if I explained this last time, but it's one of those things where you're in middle school. That's a block of experience because you're exposed to a certain group of people, a certain environment. High school, you're scaling the amount of people you know. It's a different environment. College, if you go out of state, that's a totally different block of experience. You're exposed to different people there. So it's like, and then of course it's like post grad, if you go to that, applying to the workforce there, corporate, things like that, right? So it's like our life is measured in blocks of experience. And there are some in your life of experience, in that block of experience you are, wherever you are when COVID happened, that affects how you develop. So some people theorize that people being in college when COVID happened is going to fracture that between people who are in high school. Because when you're in COVID and you're in college and all of a sudden you can't see anyone, you're in this new environment, you can't actually stratify your identity there because the whole point of college is to spoon feed you adulthood, then you're lacking that part of your life. Whereas for people in high school when COVID happened, you can't see anyone there, the implications are far less. So it just depends. It depends on what event you were hit with in what block of experience you were in. So I will say Gen Z is fractured in that way. I think COVID is a big part of it because a lot of people attribute COVID to like people being on their phones a lot more in the development of more nuanced and complex internet culture where it's no longer homogenous, but it's all these subgroups. So I think it depends on where you are developmentally in that block of experience when that development of internet culture started to happen.
Wow. I wonder if it's almost like different generations that had a war and some went into the war or some were old enough to where they didn't have to, where COVID was almost like that type of separation divide on a radical change in what was happening in the world.
Well, I think that's completely true. Because think about it too. When people are at the end of college, say like, and so say you're like a junior in college, senior in college when COVID happens, and you're still Gen Z at that point, right? You are basically, you're almost completely cognitively developed. You are a nuanced, fully fledged human being, right? You're going to become much less reliant on internet exposure to become a full, complete person there, right? So your primary exposure to the internet is back in like 2016, where like a viral vine could get you on Ellen. Whereas if you're in high school, still developing socially and trying to figure out who you are, you're taking more and more from the internet at that time, and thus you're becoming more of that. So yeah, it's a much more potent development for people. I mean, a much more of a potent effect with people who were in high school at that time and still developing as individuals.
So when I was young, of course, me being your father, I'm 20 or 30 something years older than you. When
Oof.
when cars were imported in the United States, Japanese cars were considered crap initially, like horrible. Oh, a Japanese car. And now, of course, a Japanese car is considered a premier, well-designed, well-built car. And in some cases, some would say they've
Yeah,
even
but not allowed in the US, so you have to monopolize it.
no, there they are. I mean, a Camry, a Toyota, right? Some would say at times the Japanese even better built than a German-made car. I'm just saying, but it started off as cheap, and its brand eventually changed because they understand the competitive landscape. So that brand was known as a cheap brand initially. Now it's known as a premier brand. Like, for example, Lexus or Infinity or something like that. That's a high-end brand. I'm wondering, Gia, certain brands that have been around through different generations. Let me give you one. Starbucks. Starbucks has actually gone from the millennial generation to your generation. How is Starbucks brand viewed by you, by your generation?
Ooh, okay. I love this conversation because Starbucks and Lush are actually the two brands that got me really into product branding. I'm fascinated by it because I think it's so cool the way they portray their food as healthy, even though it's absolute shit for you. What I will say, I think when was Starbucks founded? Let me first look into that to fact check myself. Starbucks founded because there's a difference between
I
when it was
guess like
founded and
89
when
maybe?
it became more popular. So
What
yeah,
do you,
founded in 1971.
71.
So it was
Wow,
founded back then.
71.
Right? That's forever ago. Oh my God. Sorry. No offense to your age. But it was founded a very long time ago, but due to the rise of social media, so think Instagram, think flip phones, in the beginning, early ages of Instagram, Starbucks was a status symbol then. So you would see the Kardashians posting with the old Starbucks logo. It became part of a digital performance, right? So at that point, because technology was at that point kind of becoming globalized just a little bit then, that was the beginning of it. It was a very novel thing to have. So it was very exclusive. It was very cool because Starbucks has always been expensive, but because the Kardashians were doing it, because all these celebrities, influencers were doing it, it was a very exclusive thing. Now, when Starbucks has gone from novel and exclusive to something that everyone else is now doing, you're seeing more wealthy people be more drawn to different brands. Like Erewhon is a new status symbol. Joe and the Juice is a big one. Blue Bottle Coffee. So people are going more into like what their niche Starbucks is because now the value, the utility of these brands is no longer exclusivity as a whole, but more so specific brands and what their brand says about you and what it signals about your identity. So I think Starbucks is seen as very basic now as opposed to a cool thing just because it's so accessible and everyone has it and everyone ever is posting about it to the point where if you really love Starbucks as like an adult, it's like, what are you doing? You're boring.
Yeah, but as it's scaled up to be Starbucks on every corner, it's gone through a lot of problems with its food products and even labor issues. So it's somewhat looked down
Mm.
upon in your gen. I mean, you know, millennials look down upon it because of that. How about your generation?
Well, now it is especially because well, with the Palestine-Israeli thing. Starbucks, I'm unsure if it was busted or not, but what I will say, the perception of Starbucks is that they support one side that most of Gen Z does not. And people are boycotting, and people boycott Starbucks. I want to say every other year they were boycotting because Starbucks got busted for union busting about 3 years ago. Starbucks generally, as a massive corporation, does not have great labor practices. I worked at Starbucks though. I worked at a Starbucks in Jewel Osco. I was a little bit behind, but it was a great work experience for me. So I think it does depend. What I do think is I think a lot of people see these huge overarching rules and these huge things that Starbucks as a corporation, as a super higher up like C-suite executives say, and use that to represent the day-to-day work experience of most workers, which it doesn't trickle down that much. It doesn't affect day-to-day workers that much. But I do think a lot of people boycott Starbucks, because it's good to say, it makes people feel good to say that they're boycotting something that they disagree with. And B, because generally with young people like to choose huge, big corporate brands, and that's easy for them to boycott and say, we're not doing it. We're not doing this. For
Yeah,
example, McDonald's is objectively worse when it comes to morality, right? Young people are talking about boycotting McDonald's, but they're doing it much less because McDonald's is cheaper. People like McDonald's more. So it's like, it's based off of convenience. So all these concerns are a way of signaling that you are a good person, but only when it is convenient.
I agree with that. It's interesting you said Starbucks and McDonald's because I go to a Starbucks because it is like McDonald's to me, meaning it's predictable, consistent, reliable. So if I'm in a country and I want to get something that I'm familiar with, I go to a Starbucks as opposed to trying to experiment and find something else that's in that area.
Yeah, that's what I did when we were whenever we're in Spain, whenever we're in Italy, I will be drawn to Starbucks, especially to do my work because there's also less stigma there. It's more of a westernized environment, so the locals aren't going to look at me weird for working. Because of course I'm working. I'm American in Starbucks, you know?
It's true, right? Let's talk about some brands that your generation seems to gravitate towards. There's one that seems to overlap in all generations, and that's Patagonia. Patagonia seems to have really captured everyone because it's one of those, we love the environment, we make quality products. It might be a bit pricey, but we are not just making something to cover you. We're here to actually protect the planet at the same time.
Yes. So I think that was a really big thing for Pat. I think that's definitely what catalyzed Patagonia's career as a generally desirable brand. What I will say is again, for young people now, it is partially that, but it's more so what the brand itself signals. So Patagonia is a really good. I think of it as like for a lot of people, it's seen as crunchy. People call it crunchy and granola. People who like hiking will wear Patagonia. It's more so when you wear Patagonia, what does it say about you? So what kind of hiking do you like to do? Is it as intense as Arc'teryx, for example? No, Arc'teryx is like Mount Everest kind of hiking gear. It's less intense than Arc'teryx. It's a I'm trying to explain this. accurately, but it's more so a recreational way of being outside. It's showing that you like being outside, but not to an insane extent to where it takes up your whole life. It's a cute brand. They have a good logo. People love the logo. They have ethical practices, so it says that you are this kind of person, that kind of person. So I think their moral basis is a huge part of the brand, but more so it developed into what it means beyond that.
Got it. Okay, let's talk about some brands then. Some are digital, meaning completely online. Other ones are physical. I want to go with some digital ones. TikTok, your generation's gravitated towards, right? That's it. That's the dominant player, more than Instagram, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
YouTube brand.
People, I don't think people see it as social. I mean, I don't YouTube. YouTube 100% has a brand. I think people still view the TikTok as being a social media, even though it's not. We all know that all social platforms are entertainment platforms now. But TikTok, but when people went from Instagram to TikTok, they kind of just generalized TikTok as also a social media platform because they do follow their friends on there, right? They will every once in a while see someone that they vaguely know and things like that, right? YouTube never tried to be a social like a social media. YouTube has always been an entertainment platform where you go there to watch
Agreed.
more long form content of people that you look up to and don't know. So it's like it's very different there to where YouTube never tried to be social. TikTok is perceived as social even though it's not.
Now, a company that's a monster is an Amazon, and I'm not sure how you would define what an Amazon is. It's a movie studio. It does books. It's all these things. When I say Amazon to you, do you think about a delivery service, or is it something that's even more monstrous?
Well, it is more monstrous, right? I think of it as a delivery service because that's what I use it for. But then I'll like drive down Harlem and I'll see an Amazon grocery store, right? And Whole Foods is partnered with Amazon now. It's like it is everywhere, and I think a lot of young people know that it's this monstrous corporation. Like they won when it came to monopolizing an entire industry and doing God knows what, right? So yeah. I think a lot of people understand that it is larger. I think a lot of people are also wary of it because it is larger. Because when you go into Whole Foods, it is scary to think that you can pay with a fingerprint, that you can pay with your palm, right? So
Face.
even though
You could
people
face.
recognize that you are crazy to me for doing that, even though I think I'm just an
No, but
alarmist.
it's true. By the way,
Yeah.
I have bad news for you. Amazon owns Whole Foods. They didn't partner. They own it.
Aw.
I know. I'm sorry to
I
burst
could
the
see
bubble on
young people
that.
liking Whole Foods less for that reason. That's really interesting because Whole Foods are very suspicious. I mean, not Whole Foods. Young people are very suspicious of these huge monster corporations just
Hey,
because you can't really fathom the scale of it. Yeah, there's also like a lot more awareness of what that means for the day-to-day worker, right? Yeah, ooh, Amazon's brand, it works. It's really good, but it does get scary for a lot of young people.
what's your thought on sportswear companies like Nike? Do they have a positive name in your generation?
I mean, generally, Nike is again seen as like the Starbucks of sportswear, though, right? It's like it's sponsored by all of these huge like athletes and influencers, but people tend to choose at least people who aren't in like very intense sports where they have to wear Nike because it's sponsored, right? Or like Adidas, right? Adidas and Nike are like seen as like entertaining, even though actually Adidas is really good because everyone like every year they'll have a shoe that is trending. So people like Adidas for like more niche products as well. But people tend to choose their sportswear and what they wear based off of the activity they do, activity they do. So it's like if you're a weightlifter, you're probably going to be wearing Gymshark or something along those lines because that is for powerlifters, right? Powerlifters wear Gymshark. That's what you're always seeing there. If you're a hiker, if you're like a very intense person who does things like that, Patagonia, Arc'teryx, like all these different brands. Nike is seen as like even like if you're a runner, if you do yoga, Aloe, Lululemon, things like that. So Nike is seen as a baseline thing where yeah, you can rely on it being good. Like there's some standout products like Nike Tech. People love Nike Tech. You're like with Adidas, like the Adidas Gazelles are huge right now. It's seen as generally unremarkable. It doesn't say anything about you. It's like useless in terms of utility of describing who you are.
When I say Apple, what do you think of? What's the first thing that comes to mind when I say Apple?
Oh my God. Like, I mean, the computer I'm on right now, my phone.
Well,
People
no,
love
which one?
Apple. It's a status symbol.
Did you think Apple computer or did you think Apple phone? Which one?
Well, I think of Apple as the ecosystem. I'm also biased because when I'm in marketing, I'm going to obviously think of it as a larger scale there. But I think people are obviously going to think of it as their phones immediately because that's what they have most access to. And then iPads, like watches, their computer. Yeah, I mean, most people own an Apple device.
Well, that's true where you're at. The rest of the world is actually dominated
Where
by
I am.
Android.
Where? What?
Android. Android.
It's dominated by what?
Android. Google dominates
Oh,
the lead.
yeah. Yeah.
North America and different pockets of the world. That's why WhatsApp is actually a more dominant messaging platform than iMessenger, but most Americans and North Americans use iMessage over WhatsApp. So it's
Well,
interesting.
yeah, and that's why I think well, Western behavior is so interesting for that reason because you kind of get this really weird anomaly where it's a group of people, right? And obviously there are problems within America, but it's a group of people that generally have a lot of their basic needs covered. And that's what we see most of the behavior stem from. So, how does a group of people act when they have most of their basic needs covered? And thus, as a result, they're going to act out of function of signaling status.
Right. And Apple is a high level, high profiled. Like to have the next Apple iPhone is a big deal, right?
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because Apple
Yes.
makes sure to make it so you know if you have the next phone by moving the camera lens just a little this way. So when someone sees the back of your phone, they go, "Oh, you got the new one because I can see the camera lens, or there's another lens or a different flash." They deliberately want to make sure you can see that status symbol of that new upgrade.
Uh, I'll give you another one. I just saw a video on TikTok where it's like, "Hey guys, new trend: upload who you are based off of the commercial for the kind of iPhone you have." And people were getting hated on for having older models.
Like your brother. Okay, let's go. It's
Yeah.
funny to ask your brother what iPhone he is because I don't know. And he's by the way,
Ew. He could have a flip phone if he could.
Gia's brother is he doesn't care if he has a phone. He could like leave it in a drawer for a week and it doesn't matter to him. And I actually am somewhat envious.
Carrier pigeon would be good for him. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm envious of that because he is not connected to that world at all. And it's really refreshing. It's frustrating when you want to communicate with somebody like that, but I get it. Gia, we mentioned, or I mentioned briefly Android. That is Google. Does Google and Facebook, do they have a positive or negative perception? Remember, Facebook, of course, owns Meta, owns all these other companies. What? What?
Well, this is so interesting because I actually got a pop-up on Instagram yesterday, and it was like, we're selecting a small group of people to answer questions about Meta. And all the questions basically were, do you like Meta? Do you think young people like Meta? Do you think Meta adds to the economy or not? And I'm going to be honest, when I was thinking on the scale of a bunch of young people as a whole, it was all generally negative. Like there was even talk on TikTok where if TikTok was bought up by Meta, people are no longer going to be on TikTok as a result. Like, because I also think people blame Meta as what is ruining Instagram because Instagram has always had a lot of problems. Instagram is seen as like very far behind stealing features from other platforms, right? But it's like a lot of people blame that on Meta, and a lot of people are very scared of Meta as a result.
Wow. How about Google? How's Google seen?
Very different. People see Google as more so, even though Google's a lot of things, people see Google as primarily a search engine instead of this huge like corporation instead, right? So Meta is seen as owning a bunch of these different things. And even though Google does the same thing, Google's brand is still very limited to just the search engine.
Hmm. Does Microsoft have a story with your generation?
No, no one really thinks about Microsoft. Old.
It's old, but it's a $2.5 trillion company, almost $3 trillion. It's one of the biggest in the world. It has
I'm
more.
gonna be honest, the only thing I think young people associate with Microsoft now is Minecraft, because I think Minecraft was bought up by
Oh my
Microsoft, and
God,
that's
it
like maybe
was.
the only, yeah.
How about brands when it comes to fashion? Tell me who's on the high end of Gen Z's fashion and who's on the low end of Gen Z fashion.
Okay, so it depends on what group you're in right now. So there's a trend happening called the old money trend, where it's these young people trying to and Sandy's actually really good. Like every time I see this trend, I'm reminded of Sandy because Sandy has her linens down. She knows how to dress monochromatically. Like she's really great with this stuff. But there's a trend of young people trying to masquerade as wealthier and not just like a certain kind of money. Like you think of like the LA kind of money of people freshly going to LA and suddenly making money. And it's like there are these huge tech bros and people call that new money. They think it's trashy. People want to emulate something called old money. What is old money? Old money is seen as generational wealth to the point where it's not only you that didn't need to worry about your basic needs being covered, but your parents, your grandparents, you guys had it all promised for you beforehand. So what does that mean? Loro Piana, Loewe, Birkins, Hermes, all these brands that are, and even though like the Birkin now is so everyone will recognize it because it is like a $50,000 bag, these brands are huge because they're seen as these brandless things, even though like it's still a status symbol. So for that group of people, those brands are huge. For other groups of people, it's different, right? So it's like you have this kind of aesthetic online called Gorpcore, right? Where it's this outdoorsy thing. That's where Patagonia and Arc'teryx will come into play. That's totally different. I just got a pair of shoes from Asics, which would have ironically been those would have been like really loser shoes
Really?
about like this larger aesthetic called gorpcore, right? So it depends on what aesthetic you fall into and what subgroup you're exposed to. But very largely, I think people are seeing Gucci and Louis Vuitton as trashy because, by the way, Louis Vuitton is so often fake that you can't really legitimize it anymore. But like Gucci's saving grace was Harry Styles representing it once, right? So it just depends. A lot of these brands that we see immediately as being like these really cool big brands are now being delegitimized and seen as trashy because now more people have access to them, so they no longer say anything exclusive.
All right. And the last question is destination. So during COVID, the three big destinations for people to get away to were Tulum, Dubai, and Bali. That was like the triangle. You got to go to one of those, right? And then you might throw in Ibiza or some other. I'm just wondering, is there an international for North American Gen Zs? Is there a cool place to get away to that has a good brand? Does a certain city, like I'm in Dubai right now, Dubai has a very good international brand. I'm wondering in your gen,
Internationally, not for young people though.
okay, so what's
Young people don't love Dubai.
they don't love Dubai.
What?
They don't love Dubai.
They don't, no. Which is why I thought your article about Dubai was so interesting because a lot of young people see, and keep in mind, for young people in the West, a lot of people have a revolutionary spirit, right? So they see anything that's major corporation, they don't like it. Dubai is quite literally the embodiment of like a consumption major corporation brand. Like that Dubai is about money. And that works. That's good. Dubai was built from the desert up, so there's no real historical culture there. So of course, all of their culture is going to be based on the business they bring in. That makes total sense. Young people in North America don't love that as a result. I think what I see very commonly is like a European summer. That's pretty big. A lot of young people go to Greece, they go to Italy. Ibiza's getting big now too because all of these girls and influencers are posting their clothing. So Ibiza has a certain clothing-based aesthetic that you want to emulate, right? But I don't know. I'm trying to think of any very specific place. I'm unsure. I remember even other young people didn't quite love when I went to Indonesia because they thought it was like a strange thing. Why is an American going to Asia? That's really weird. The only acceptable place for young people to go to Asia is Japan, apparently, because that's
That is pretty
already
awesome.
a westernized place.
Yeah, I love Japan.
Japan is pretty awesome, but it's like there's a lot of stigma against all these other amazing, beautiful places. When in reality, it's like these people will say they know much about the world, but they've only been to Cabo and then like maybe Rome once with their family when they were 8, which is fine. But that's not pure, that's not that is international travel, but you don't get to understand the entire world through exclusively that.
I love it. Gia Rakowski, if people want to find you, you have a Substack, TikTok. How do they find you?
Okay, my TikTok handle is attempted soch. It's ATTEMP. Wait, ATTEMPTEDSOC. That's attempted soch. My Substack is under my name, Gia Rutkowski Substack. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm going to be doing a new publication on Substack covering exactly these topics. So tune into that. You will find it under my major publication.
Gia, thanks a lot for hanging out. I appreciate it. I love you.
I love you. Bye.